Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our first check-in with the 2025 Club World Cup. Every team has now played a game, so we're going to take a look at those games, look at the movers and the shakers, and of course the biggest storylines that are happening off the pitch as well. And there's a few. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, Joseph Lowry's in the house. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Ryan. I'm bummed. I meant to book an Italian soccer team to stand behind me for the through the entirety of this show. Couldn't end up getting that done. That's on me. I apologize. It'll be better tomorrow.
Just out of interest, what gender would that team be, or does it matter?
Nah, flip a coin. Doesn't matter.
Cool.
Get them in.
Cool. Excellent unrelated riff to anything that's happening in real life. Thank you very much, Joe. Graham Ruthven, how are you?
I'm very well, Ryan Bailey. I've actually got Auckland City waiting outside, ready to come in. They're actually mowing my lawn today. You know how they're a part-time team? They have to work in between their games, so they're busy outside. But I'll call them in halfway through.
Okay, so we're hearing about the jobs that Auckland City do. So is there like someone who works in a bank, there's an electrician, and there's the guy who looks after Graham Ruthven's estate, apparently, as well. That's great.
There's a butcher, there's a baker, there's a candlestick maker. They do it all.
Bit of a commute, though, to Glasgow, arguably, you should say.
Well, yeah, is it any less of a commute than some of the teams have had at this tournament, from East Coast to West Coast? That's all I'm saying. It's probably less.
Yeah, the polar bears aren't being done any favours by this tournament, and perhaps not the World Cup.
The lawn must be cared for, Ryan, at the Ruthven estate. Have some respect.
You make a good point. You make a very good point. And I hope you make many good points on the next hour or so. Before we get to the Club World Cup chat, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is the best way to support this endeavour. Bonus episodes, bonus video, and perhaps bestest of all, access to our Discord. Most of the cool kids, no, all the cool kids are hanging out in our Discord. Come check us out, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. Please, and a thank you. All right, Graham, we're going to remove our cynicism filters. Or maybe we're not. Let's see how the vibe goes to discuss the Club World Cup. Why don't we start off with some of the storylines and the interest in the tournament so far? Because going into this tournament, Graham, there was a lot of chat about unsold tickets, and we have seen some evidence of that. The Chelsea LAFC game, for example, earlier this week, getting just over 22,000 in Atlanta. A lot of extenuating circumstances with it being a Monday afternoon with an out-of-market MLS team playing in Atlanta there. So there's a lot to be forgiven there. Ulsan HD and Mamelodi Sundowns as well, getting just over 3,000 in Orlando too. Some extenuating circumstances there, a weather delay and whatnot. But there have been, for the most part, Graham, you could say, some pretty good attendances and a decent amount of interest, like over 80,000 at the Rose Bowl for PSG Atleti, for example.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, I am enjoying this tournament. And I knew I would. I knew that as soon as matches started, I would get pretty involved because that's just what I'm like, especially with some of the weird and wonderful matchups that we've had, like Benfica Boca, which was the match of the tournament so far. I think we're maybe going to touch on that later in the episode. Or even that Ulsan HD Mamelodi Sundowns game that you mentioned there, Ryan. Yes, there was maybe more people in my living room watching that game than there was actually in Orlando.
Oh, your estate workers, yeah.
Oh, the Auckland City guys who are on the sofa with me. But there's a curiosity about these matches because these are teams that just haven't played each other before. And in terms of the attendances, I've been on my soapbox a little bit on Blue Sky and on Twitter this week because I think I fundamentally disagree with a lot of the narrative around this tournament. And there's an internal conflict for me because I accept there is a large degree of grubbiness around this tournament, around Gianni Infantino's his baby, excuse me. I mean, I guess all babies are grubby, but this one is especially grubby in that it's been bought and paid for by Saudi Arabia's Sovereign Wealth Fund. But I read an article about how this expanded Club World Cup doesn't have a purpose. And I just fundamentally disagree with that because I talk about purpose quite often with tournaments, and I've mentioned it with Leagues Cup where I don't really know what the purpose of that tournament is over the CONCACAF Champions Cup. But the purpose with this Club World Cup, Joe's doing, that is exactly what it is.
It's a YouTube special right there.
Yeah. The purpose with the Club World Cup is pretty clear, and the thing that keeps thrusting it into focus for me is when I hear, when Benfica were playing Boca Juniors. The commentator said this was the first time that Benfica had played a team from Argentina in a competitive match. And it was the first time that Boca Juniors had played a team from Portugal in a competitive match. That's the purpose of this competition right here. You have these huge clubs from around the world. And until now, they didn't have a competitive arena to face each other, and I think that is a really strong selling point. I think a lot of the negativity around attendances as well has been wide of the mark, and I was ready to stick the boot in on that. I was fully expecting that opening game, that Inter Miami Al Ahly game, I was expecting swathes of empty seats and to really go after FIFA and this tournament for their high ticket prices, which has been an issue. I'm not trying to deny that. But you look at, and yeah, you're right, Ryan, there have been some exceptions, like the Chelsea LAFC game was a bad look, the Ulsan Sundowns match was also pretty bad. But some of the other games here, Inter Miami Al Ahly, 60,000 fans of that game. Palmeiras Porto, 46,000. PSG Atleti, 80,000. Benfica Boca, 55,000. Monterrey Inter, 40,000. Fluminense Dortmund, 35,000. City Vidad, 40,000. Real Madrid Al Hilal last night, 62,000. I think the larger issue has been some of the stadium selections where Palmeiras Porto getting 46,000. That's a great attendance for that game. You stick it in MetLife, an NFL stadium, and those fans are rattling around a little bit. So I just fundamentally disagree with a lot of the narrative that nobody cares about this competition. I think that is a very Euro-centric, Premier League-centric point of view to take. And you look at like the Boca fans taking over Miami Beach, or the River Plate fans, or even like the Urawa Red Diamonds, who I know didn't take the biggest attendance to Seattle. But for anyone who was at that game, I followed a number of people who were at that game. I think Manuel Veith was at that game. Like, they brought the noise, they brought the atmosphere, and so there has been more life to this tournament than I think a lot of people were expecting.
Yeah. Joe, is it fair to say that it is a stadium selection issue, perhaps? Because those numbers that Graham's talked about, I struggle to think of many other countries that could produce that many fans in this kind of tournament with those, disparate teams involved. It is quite impressive when you look at it on the numbers there.
Yeah, I think it is a partial stadium selection issue. I also think FIFA's messaging and their ticket pricing, things that Graham referenced earlier, but I think those are real factors here for why some of these crowds haven't been better. Henry Bushnell had a great piece for Yahoo about the ticketing, and that's been a big discussion. Henry tackles those kinds of big picture issues, I think, better than anybody, honestly, in American soccer. So I'd encourage people to go and read it. You can find it on his author page. I want to start with this quote that Henry included in that piece from Gianni Infantino back in April. Quote, "If in America you fill soccer stadiums for friendly games, then when you come with a World Cup with the best players to win a competition, for sure, stadiums will be full." That's Gianni Infantino. Where he's been wrong, by the way. Like, to be clear, he's been wrong. That quote is incorrect. That has not happened whatsoever. FIFA's announced attendance so far through the first 12 games of the tournament, so this is not quite up to date. But Henry went in and did the math. Only 54% of seats have been full. Now, in big stadiums, 54% is still a big number, right? Like, you're still getting a lot of butts and seats there. But Henry goes on to talk about in that piece, there's really a couple of reasons for why attendances haven't been bigger, right? Number one is that FIFA executives went out and bucked advice from folks in the U.S. and hosted in big stadiums, Ryan, exactly like you led me in. That they decided to go and host these games in 80,000 seaters means that even if you get 40,000 and you get a camera pan to the upper deck, and I saw this in the City Wydad game the other day, you do get a lot of empty seats right there smack dab in the middle of your camera. The other thing is the ticket prices were absurd. Like, right off the bat, FIFA grossly overestimated the amount of interest that was going to be paid attention to by fans for this tournament. You think about that Chelsea LAFC game, which is a perfect example. It's a little bit of a specialized case because no Atlanta United in that game, unlike some of the other MLS teams that have gotten to play in their markets. Even if that had been Club Leon instead of LAFC, you're still not going to fill Mercedes-Benz Stadium for that game. But that game is in the afternoon on a weekday. These games are made for TV in a way that they're not made for the actual attendances and the fans in markets to go to these games. At least not when you're charging a ton of money for tickets. When FIFA first released tickets in December, the cheapest for the opener, which is Inter Miami, where Miami fans in Miami can watch Miami all the time, and Al Ahly, which is a big club, don't get me wrong. But that's a long way for Al Ahly fans to travel, and certainly not the same draw in the United States, Al Ahly, as one of the larger European teams. The cheapest tickets for that opener were $223 when they were first listed. So I think FIFA pretty much bungled all of this, assumed that there would be interest when there's really not a proof of concept for there to be interest outside of the ICC-esque, International Champions Cup friendly games that we get in a PSG Atleti situation. I think there's potential here in this tournament for it to be more fun than it is. I think the crowd certainly could have been bigger if FIFA hadn't fumbled the bag here.
I think they realised their mistake late with those ticket prices that you referenced, Joe, which I'm definitely not going to disagree with. They're way too high, and it seems like it's certainly in the run-up to that Inter Miami Al Ahly opening game, they were going round and they were offering all kinds of discounts. And it seems like they've done that with a lot of games. And lo and behold, they've maybe saved some of the attendances for those games by doing that. Had they done that from the outset, then maybe attendances are even greater. But I fundamentally disagree with people who are joining the dots of that reality to then make the judgment that there isn't the interest in the US for tournaments like this and for soccer in general. And I think that's where a lot of the sneeriness comes from, that the US shouldn't be in some way hosting this tournament. This is a tournament where the non-UEFA teams are bringing the interest, and it's been hosted by the USA. Of course, like, random TalkSport presenter was always going to hate this tournament, but I just think it is unfair to join those dots. And this is a tweet that I read yesterday, right? I'm going to read this out because it's quite incredible. The irony of this Club World Cup is if it was in a football heartland like the UK or Germany, it really could have worked. You could imagine Bristol getting behind Esperance or Glasgow cheering on Ulsan HD, but corporate capitalist America wouldn't, because they just don't get it. That is the gold medal in the Bad Takes Olympics, because I cannot imagine Glasgow cheering on Ulsan HD. In the States, my actual concern with this competition is, where do you take it next after the US? If the US isn't just going to host this tournament every single time, which I kind of suspect might actually end up being the case, where else do you take it? Because the US has these huge immigrant communities, and also American fans tend to be maybe a little bit more nomadic, because they will latch onto a team because they maybe don't have that geographical connection. We see it with Wrexham, so maybe you do get American fans that will latch onto River Plate or Ulsan HD or Mamaloni Sundowns or whoever. And actually, I think the US is the only country in the world. Maybe these attendances could be better, yeah, that's certainly fair, but it's the only country in the world that I think would be getting attendances this high for this tournament as it's been formed.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, actually. And I think that there's a scenario where in the UK or Germany, there's an attitude of get this thing off my doorstep.
Yeah, there are protests, I think, if it's happening in Germany, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely in France. They love to do that kind of thing, Joe. Yeah, so I think you're quite right there, Graham. And in the next one, whether it's in 4 years or 2 years or next week, whenever they decide to do it, if they want growth, then I think that has to remain in the US. You're quite right there. A couple other things to touch on outside of the games itself. Adam Crafton in The Athletic reporting, FIFA has decided not to show videos or signage which explicitly mention challenging racism or discrimination in the US Club World Cup venues. FIFA point to their statutes of being politically neutral when asked if the US political climate played a part in their decision. So apparently challenging racism is not politically neutral in the United States these days. Wonderful stuff. And we probably should mention on Wednesday, Juventus visiting the White House. Tim Weah and Weston McKennie positioned behind the president as he discussed the war in Iran and asked the players if women could play on their team in some kind of ill-judged attempt to shoehorn that very important right-wing topic of transgender athletes into the conversation. It wasn't a great look for those involved, perhaps the president most of all. Graham, yeah, I mean, we don't need to dwell on this too much, but it is a reminder that the host nation and its current environment is inextricably linked to this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, the image of Tim Weah and Weston McKennie standing behind Donald Trump in the Oval Office on one side is like comical in a sense, but is also a reflection of the toxic and depressing backdrop that this tournament is being played against, and separating those two things out is increasingly difficult as you have the convergence of the kind of two spheres, which was reflected in this whole surreal situation of the Juventus team standing behind Trump as he's talking about Iran and everything that's going on with that situation. Weird.
A little bit weird, yes, you're quite right. Tim Weah's quote after Juventus' win, it was all a surprise to me, honestly. They told us we have to go, and I had no choice but to go. Weston McKennie previously on record not being a fan of the gentleman in that office. It's interesting times. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dig into the games. Why don't we talk about Real Madrid and their start with their new guys, their Xavi and their Trent. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our Club World Cup review. Joe, before we get to the action, I think we'll start off with Real Madrid. How do we feel about this Club World Cup thing of individual player intros coming onto the field? Are you... Nope. Terrible. So bad. Okay.
Team
Bad?
Graham. Yeah, not even going to let you finish your conversation there.
Sorry.
We don't need to see it for every game. Like, for the opener, I saw it into Miami, Al coming out of the tunnel. Okay, I guess we can, like, NBA-ify this player tunnel walkouts. That's fine for the opener. And to get it for every game. I mean, are we going to get it for the match day 2 games? I was over this after 3 introductions. In the very first game, it takes forever. Graham, as yourself, a sort of connoisseur of pregame activity, I kind of thought you'd be into this, but even you're not into this.
No, it's just so, it's the antithesis of soccer, right? Like the team is the thing.
Yeah, but
that
the
you're
long
welcoming
pregame
out.
ceremonies are not. I mean, we gotta make sure we get those.
That's true. But I do enjoy a long pregame ceremony. We had one of those before the first match where French Montana and who was the other one? Swali. They were performing. Well, they were performing in body, not in spirit. The worst lip syncing I've ever seen in my life. But yeah, I'm not a fan of these player by player walkouts. And I think one of the best things about, I think about Scotland at the Euros last year, which is probably the best sort of big occasion experience I've had as a fan. I've never been to a major tournament before. And see that roar when the teams come out onto the pitch. That's incredible. It's like visceral when you're at a major tournament. And so having 22 players walk out one by one just completely dilutes that experience. So even from an events spectacle point of view, I don't like it.
Yeah, I think it's another example of what we mentioned previously. It's being designed a bit too much for TV, right? Because you're quite right, Graham. That initial sort of visceral roar that you get when a team comes out together, you're missing. But I have enjoyed like some players really being into it, and some like sort of sheepishly looking down at the ground as they come out. And it's easy to spot who values the entertainment in that and who doesn't. So
who's going to be the first player to do a kind of athletics 100-meter sprint sort of, with like a gun salute or something? You know what I mean? Like how the relay teams will come out and they'll do a sort of like a choreographed routine and they'll like Charlie's Angels style pose.
Yeah. I want someone to come out with a Sharpie and sign the lens like they do at tennis matches.
Oh, that's good.
That'd be good.
That's good.
Yeah,
Lionel.
Some of the Juve players might have some Sharpies. They might pick some up in the office they visited on Wednesday.
Maybe freebies.
Real Madrid won. Al Hilal won at Hard Rock Stadium on Wednesday. Bono saving a late penalty for Al Hilal after goals from Gonzalo Garcia and Ruben Neves. Xabi Alonso, my observation, Graham, just looked permanently overheated. But what did we make of this game?
It's probably the most flustered I've ever seen him in his life, and not just because his new Real Madrid team weren't very good in this game. It was roasting hot from what I could tell in Miami, played at 3 p.m. local time, which doesn't seem very wise to be playing these games at that time in southern Florida. And I actually thought that had an impact on the game itself, where both teams couldn't play at full intensity for the full 90 minutes. That was certainly the case with Real Madrid, where I thought a lot of their off-the-ball stuff was just downright bad. And look, that's the way it's been for Real Madrid for a long time. They have been bad at possession for ages. But I guess that's the one area you would hope Alonso would have an impact. He hasn't yet, because Al Hilal found it very easy to move the ball forward, get inside the box. There were periods of this game where I really wasn't sure what Real Madrid's plan was out of possession, because Al Hilal were just popping the ball around inside the opposition half. Real Madrid, they weren't very compact. There was space to play through them, but also no pressure on the ball. And there was a chance for Aldosari. He has a shot where he kind of bends it just wide of the post. For all the world, it looked like it was heading into the back of the net. That's like a 20-pass sequence from Al Hilal, where at no point are they engaged by a Real Madrid player, and then all of a sudden Aldosari's inside the box and has a clear look at goal. So that is clearly an area where they can improve. But as Thibaut Courtois, you can always rely on Courtois for a bit of honesty after games. He comes out after the match and says words to the effect of, they still have Ancelotti's what was the word he used? Automations. This is a team that still has Ancelotti's automations, and it's only been 4 days under Xabi Alonso. And that is it. This is a reset for Real Madrid that is going to take some time, and we certainly saw that in this first match.
I love that quote, Graham. Yeah, Ancelotti's automations in the press were hopeful to say the least. Like this was not a team under Carlo Ancelotti that pressed well whatsoever. Rome was not built in a day. This team's pressing structure will not be revamped in 4 days. For me, this game was about how the new players performed, and maybe more than that, where they were used in what Xabi Alonso's system was going to be, especially in possession, right? Because the added possession stuff for Real Madrid under Ancelotti truly was horrible, like not good whatsoever, ever, for almost any reason. So I was more curious about what the in-possession stuff was going to look like and how Alonso tweaked some of that. And at times we saw a structure in possession that looked a lot like what his Bayer Leverkusen team looked like in possession, with that 3 in the back, the box midfield, and then the front 3 with 2 really wide players and 1 central striker. Now, the players that got to those positions, and even the positions themselves, were different, right? There were no wingbacks in this game. There were effectively the wide players in the possession structure were Vinny Jr. on one side and Rodrigo on the other. No Kylian Mbappe, we should mention for this game, sick. So we did see the two wingers play those wide roles as opposed to wingbacks. Again, no wingbacks in attack or in defense really for Real Madrid in this game. We did see a central striker, and we saw a really fluid midfield in front of the back three. And a lot of that fluidity, to my eye, was triggered by Trent, the newly rebranded Trent, which a lot easier to say, frankly. I think I might stick with that when I can. Trent at times would pop up into midfield, and he would play as like the right-sided defensive midfielder in the box. So you have two defensive midfielders and two attacking midfielders, and it would be Trent and Tchouaméni as the double pivot, and it would be Fede Valverde and Jude Bellingham as the attacking midfield pairing in the box. Other times, though, we would not see Trent push quite so far into midfield. And instead of pushing in to play next to, 8-10 yards away from Tchouaméni, he would kind of just step forward from like a narrow right back position and hang out in the half space, but not high against the opposing back line in the half space, but much deeper in the half space. And so you'd have Tchouaméni kind of playing as a single pivot at times. Other times, Fede Valverde would drop in next to him. Jude Bellingham kind of had a free role on the left side of the attacking midfield group. And then you'd have Trent kind of waiting to get on the ball outside of Al Hilal's defensive structure so that he can then drive it forward on the dribble, or that he could receive and play a long ball or a ball into the box with that classic outswinging right-footed ball that we know that he likes to hit so much. So I thought Trent's role in this team was very, very interesting. And on the whole, for Real Madrid, this was not just Bayer Leverkusen copy-pasted. And we knew that it wasn't going to be, right? The pieces just don't really fit. And even in this game, without Kylian Mbappe, who was a big question mark for how he and the rest of the attacking players fit into this team, right? Even without him, all the pieces don't fit together. So we're already seeing signs of evolution from Xabi Alonso, where he is, of course, as any good coach would be. He is willing to work with his talent to put them into the best positions so that they can succeed. And for Trent, it seems like at times maybe that's going to look like him playing a little narrower as an actual center mid in possession. But again, far more often, it was him hanging out a little bit wider, not as a winger, but not as a center mid, but in that half space, deep enough, though, that he can still play make and put in some of those passes that he really likes to put in. So I thought his role in this team was fascinating.
Yeah, I thought the phases where he would move into the middle, Joe, as the right-sided midfield anchor in possession, I think that's been signposted for a while with Real Madrid, because Real Madrid honestly haven't been very good in build-up in midfield since Toni Kroos retired a year ago, where I'm unconvinced with Trent, as we're now calling him, in that role, is about his rhythm building. That's always been the issue for him in that position. He's got excellent passing range. He'll open up different angles for Real Madrid. I used to talk about the slingshot for Real Madrid when Kroos was still around, and how they would kind of lay the ball back. Kroos would then flip it in behind, and they'd have runners. I suspect that might come back, because we didn't really see it much last season, or as much last season, when they didn't have a player to play that pass. Maybe Alexander-Arnold is going to be that player for Real Madrid. But we saw for England at the Euros, where Southgate had the experiment of Alexander-Arnold in central midfield, that he is not a rhythm builder. He's also not someone who is very good at driving with the ball forward at his feet. There was a couple of moments in this game where he tried it, and the move just broke down. So even Xabi Alonso, someone with his expertise, with his outlook on the game, he, on the basis of this, still hasn't really found what Alexander-Arnold's role in this team is going to be. And I didn't think he was great overall in terms of like his execution. He starts the sequence that led to the Real Madrid goal, but I thought a lot of the time his first touch was off, his execution was off, but there were still signs of how valuable he could be when he switched play a couple times and got Vinicius into kind of like one-on-one situations. That's an easy one where you can just drop him into that team, and Alexander-Arnold will give you something different. But as someone in the centre of the pitch, I'm just really interested and fascinated to see how that pans out for him at Real Madrid.
Yeah, and there is nuance here. I messaged in our Slack like 2 minutes into this game, Trent's playing in central midfield in possession. And he was in the first couple of minutes in this game in those established possession moments. But in very few of his subsequent minutes, he comes off in the 65th minute, very few of those minutes were spent with Trent actually inverted fully into midfield. So I think Xabi Alonso knows the things that you said there, Graham. I guess all that to say, I think Alonso knows that Trent is not his best as a rhythm builder, right? That he is better in a little bit more space, or certainly a little bit wider. Again, not as a winger, but in that half space where he can drive forward and actually be more of a playmaker on the ball with his distribution, rather than having to connect little tight passes in central areas. That is not his strength, and really that's not where he played for a lot of this game. But it did happen on occasion, so I'm curious to see more of what that looks like. The other new piece of the puzzle that I was curious about in this game was Dean Housen, who didn't have like an overwhelming amount to do. I mean, this result on paper is a bit of an upset, right? With Al Hilal getting a draw, but there's obviously a ton of talent when you look at this Al Hilal team between João Cancelo at right back and Lodi and Koulibaly. I mean, this is a good team, right? Cannot believe we didn't get a Bono pun from Ryan on the U2 side of things.
I disappointed myself there, Joe.
I thought it was coming. I was sure of it. This is a capable Al Hilal team, but not a fully transcendent, they're going to go and blitz Real Madrid sort of team. But Dean Howson, in terms of his role, played as the left-sided center back in a back four in defense, and played as that center back as the structure shifted to a back three in possession. I don't think he was eye-catching really in this game, but that's going to be his role, it seems like, for Real Madrid moving forward.
There you go. Graham, we probably should give some flowers to Al Hilal, right? And Simone Inzaghi's Al Hilal, as they are now formally known. Did we see any, Inzaghi fingerprints on this, or just...
Yeah, I think we did, and I was impressed with a lot of what Al Hilal did. As you say there, Ryan, it wasn't just a managerial debut for Xabi Alonso, it was a managerial debut for Simone Inzaghi as well. So all the same things apply for Inzaghi. Lack of time with the squad, he's only just in the door. But I thought we saw more obvious Inzaghi stuff from Al Hilal than Alonso stuff from Real Madrid. I thought there were quick rotations through the midfield. The context I'm lacking here is, look, I don't watch a huge amount of Saudi Pro League, so maybe he took over a team that was in a better place to kind of suit his style than Alonso. But there were those quick rotations through midfield. I thought there was aggression out of possession. They had two forwards supporting each other in transition moments as well. Of course, no back three like we saw at Inter. But when your fullbacks are João Cancelo and then Renan Lodi on the right and left, they still had that wide threat from those two getting forward. So, as Joe said, this is an Al Hilal team with a lot of talent. Like, you go through this team and there's only, a handful of players, like maybe 3 players that casual watchers of European soccer maybe aren't familiar with. Besides that, Yasin Bono, who was an excellent goalkeeper for Sevilla, it's Koulibaly, who was at Chelsea, Lodi at Atletico Madrid, Cancelo at Man City, Ruben Neves in midfield, Milinkovic-Savic, Malcolm, who for a hot minute was an attractive proposition for Barcelona. Even Marcos Leonardo, who is a little bit younger than a lot of these other players, experienced players who have gone to the Saudi Pro League. He was an excellent young player for Benfica, and they paid quite a lot of money to sign him as a centre forward. So, yeah, it's not overly surprising that they were competitive in this match, but the extent to which they gave Real Madrid problems in this bodes well for them for the rest of the tournament. I think they could be... Look, I'm not going to go as far as saying they're going to win it, because I think PSG might do that at a stroll at a canter. But, they're a bit of a dark horse to make a deep run.
Yeah, definitely so. Entertaining stuff this game at the end as well, when Real Madrid were trying to push for that winner as well. I did enjoy that. And, of course, Bono with the late penalty save. Sorry I didn't give you two a pun. I just didn't have the desire at that point. Let's move on, shall we, to Benfica and Boca Juniors. The 2-2 result in this one. Benfica coming back from 2-0 down. Both sides getting red cards. Joe, was this the best game of the tournament so far?
Yeah, 100%. And Graham, the way you described this game and this sort of context where teams that haven't really played each other in competitive moments, where even like cultures sort of haven't met in some of these ways, as being a part of the purpose of the tournament, I think this is certainly the most fun purpose of the tournament. There may be some other ones that we'll talk about at some point down the line, but this game was awesome. And this is one of the many games in the first round of group stage matches that made it pretty clear that teams do care about this, and hence the $1 billion prize pot, but also hence some of these teams coming from non-European destinations that want to show themselves, right? I think one of the most interesting storylines from the Club World Cup as a whole is how the South American teams do, right? In general, the South American teams did very, very well. There were 3 South American teams that picked up impressive results, I think, based off of their games against higher level European competition. You had this draw for Boca Juniors that they will have seen as a missed opportunity not to collect all 3 points here. You had Palmeiras drawing Porto, although I don't even know how big of an upset that is because Palmeiras are just that good. But when you look at where these clubs are coming from and where they come in, even in something like the Opta rankings, Porto 1 spot ahead of Palmeiras coming into this tournament. And then you had Fluminense nil, Borussia Dortmund nil, and Dortmund didn't show a whole lot in that game. But this game, of those impressive results for some of the South American teams against European opposition, this was the most entertaining game of the bunch. Boca Juniors come out, and there's a ton of intensity in this game from the opening whistle. There's a lot of crazy tackles. There's a lot going on in this game. And that Boca scored 2 goals in 6 minutes, the crowd was loud. Like, the crowd was real loud in this game. and the atmosphere absolutely delivered. And then to get the chaos that we saw in this game, not one, not two, but 3 players sent off in this match. You have the Otamendi, it's Otamendi, right, who goes down inside the box for that penalty, which seemed light to me. That's my own perspective. And you have Ander Herrera getting a red card and being sent off for dissent following that penalty decision. And then you have Bellotti with a good old boot to the face later on in this game. He gets sent off. And then you have Nico Figal, Inter Miami fans stand up, Inter Miami legend Nico Figal, always good for a chaotic moment. Him coming in way late on a challenge in the second half, not complaining whatsoever, and being sent off, and all of a sudden it's 9v10. Yeah, everything about this game was awesome. The intensity was amazing. I hope we get more of this.
Yeah. Graham, do you concur with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd even go as far as saying this match in itself vindicates the whole tournament, where you have a European team playing a South American team, the South American team more than holding their own. You have 55,000 fans. Joe's absolutely right. The atmosphere in Hard Rock Stadium was absolutely electric. One of these days, someone is going to teach me how to sing and chant like an Argentinian fan, because they have a very characteristic way of doing it. There's a lot of hands, there's a lot of moving hands like this, and it just continues throughout the whole match. It's incredible. I love Argentinian fans. And the game itself was just, it was a boxing match. It was scrappy at times, but both teams were really going at each other. Obviously, you have Boca going 2-0 up Benfica. I think over the course of the match, it felt like Benfica were able to impose themselves a bit more. Carrera started to have more joy down the left side. Di Maria had more of an influence. But yeah, on the whole, I think I was more impressed with Boca, who made good use of their direct approach. They were overloading that left side with Blanco and Palacios. That's how the first goal comes about, with a knock-on that they then make the most of. Then it's another overload at the back post for a header to make it 2-0. So I'm really interested to see what Boca have left in the tank for this tournament, because they're going for it, as all the South American teams are at this tournament. And we talk about the prize money. The likelihood is that a South American team isn't going to win that $100 million prize, but they're still putting everything into this tournament, and I think that in itself gives this tournament real purpose.
Yeah, two things for me. Sorry, very briefly. I had forgotten this game was so crazy that Ander Herrera had already come off in this match before he gets the red cards. That's my bad on that. There's been a lot going on in this game. The other thing is, one of my favorite bits of this tournament is, Grammy mentioned Di Maria there, is just like the guys remembering dudes of it all, right? Like, there's so many players that pop up. Well, it was Kaku, former New York Red Bulls number 10, who booted the ball right at fans in Kansas City a few years back, who popped up for Al Ain in their game against Juventus the other night. In this game, all of the familiar characters and friends that we met along the way playing in this match. Alan Velasco playing for Boca Juniors, and nobody in Argentina likes Alan Velasco, it seems like, one bit these days, because he's not very good, and they all blame FC Dallas for it, and it's beautiful. That is one of my favorite bits of this entire tournament. Long may it continue.
I hope someone on our Discord makes the gif of Leo DiCaprio holding the beer, pointing at the TV, but with Joe's head on. Guys,
very much so.
That'll be wonderful. Graham, given the impressive South American performances so far, Club World Cup history has traditionally been dominated by European teams, and you mentioned it's unlikely that the South American team makes a deep run, but could they? And if they do, is it Boca?
It's not impossible. I think I would be surprised if it is Boca, because as much gusto as they played against Benfica, maybe lacking a little bit of kind of top end talent. It's particularly if Edison Cavani, who by all accounts has been excellent for them since he's joined them like a year ago, he was out injured for this game. So we could have had another one of Joe's characters that we met along the way making an appearance in that match, and hopefully he will play in a future match. The South American team that I have been most impressed with, and I think I've caught all of them, I think, but I was really impressed with Flamenco in their match against Esperance. Now, Esperance, in the grand scheme of things, maybe aren't that great, but Flamenco were just completely dominant in terms of how they controlled that game. They are a team that wants to have a lot of the ball under Felipe Luis, who is their manager. By all accounts, he's one of the highest rated young managers. Not Scolari, no, he's certainly not a highly rated young manager, certainly in South America. I think a lot of people expect Felipe Luis to make a move to Europe at some point in the future, but you look at the numbers from this game: 69% possession, 3 big chances to Esperance's 0. They want to build out from the back and have control as they move up the field. They get their fullbacks high. It's Varela on the right and then Lucas on the left to give them that option. And then they have real goal threat by players like De Arrascaeta, who scored the first goal by just holding his run for the cutback. I wrote something about him before the tournament. He is really prolific for Flamengo, who are top of the Brazilian league right now. That is kind of his trademark thing. It's a little bit of a, I don't know, like a Bruno Fernandes sort of run that he makes, where he just holds that run for the comeback, for the cutback. But the standout player was someone making his debut in this game, someone we are all very familiar with, Jorginho. They've just dropped him into this team, and he is absolutely perfect for the way that they play. He's the one dictating the game in possession, maintaining the tempo, keeping the ball moving. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how, I think Flamengo have, it's either tomorrow or the next, or the following day on Saturday. They've got Chelsea in their next match, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how they match up against Chelsea, because of course Maresca ball is about having possession as well. If you have someone like Jorginho, someone as accomplished as him, are Flamengo going to control a lot of that game? I suspect they might. It's just about what they do with that possession. That's going to be the interesting thing.
Wonderful stuff. Maybe they'll do the flamenco, as you keep pronouncing it, Graham. We'll see.
Is that not how you... I try. This is the one time I try. The one time.
Anyway, we'll
someone
give you a pass.
Someone in the Discord tell me how that's actually pronounced. Flamenco. One of the two.
Well, it's in that arena. Let's take a quick break, shall we? When we come back, we'll touch on a few more games from this competition, and we're going to look at the underdogs, Auckland City. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our Club World Cup special. Why don't we, Joe, talk about those guys from the other side of the world who may or may not be the groundsman on Graham Ruthven's estate, Auckland City. I don't know if we call them a controversial presence in this tournament, but they have played their first game against Bayern Munich. It was a 10-0 result, not in their favour. Bayern had 31 shots in this game, 72% possession. Not a great showing from Auckland City. So, I mean, they are a part-time team. There's a bit of a quirk as to why they're here, with the Australian teams not being in OFC, so they couldn't take that berth. I mean, do we think, Joe, there's any learnings from Auckland City being a part of this whole process?
Yeah, I mean, I learned that Harry Kane let me down on my Golden Boot pick for this competition. That's one thing I learned. We're in the same boat, Ryan. I also learned that I think Auckland City put in a fine performance. I thought they'd lose by more in this game, if I'm being totally honest. Here's a stat for you all. PSG had more possession against Atletico Madrid than Bayern Munich did against Auckland City. Graham, I wanted you to be more surprised by that and not to just nod and say yes, like you already knew it. I'm disappointed. PSG had 74% of the ball against Atletico Madrid in that 4-0 win. Wild stuff. And Bayern Munich had 71% of the ball in this game. I do love, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, I do love that FIFA is giving us the possession stat. I don't know if you guys remember from the World Cup, where there's the possession of one team and the possession of the other team, and then the time that the ball is contested and not in possession of either team. That's popped up on some of the broadcasts for this game. I think that's a really helpful way to look at possession. Again, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I do like that exists. Yeah, this Auckland game, I'm a bit torn on, frankly, because I love the idea that they get to come and participate in this competition. I think it's really cool, and you can see it, right? I mean, there are, in addition to, butchers, bakers, candlestick makers, and Graham's lawn caretakers, in addition to all of that stuff, there are also some content makers on this Auckland team that have been kind of documenting their trip to the United States and then playing in these games. It's cool, right? And watching some of those videos, it gives you like real sympathy with a lot of these guys, and it helps you identify with how cool this experience must be, right? At the same time, these are useless soccer games as far as like the spectacle is concerned. And so I would not shock me, Ryan, as far as takeaways from this game, if we see some sort of playoff for the team coming out of Oceania against, an MLS team or an African team, whatever, an Asian team, against another confederation that's not Europe or South America, effectively. And we do see maybe these teams from Oceania not actually making the final version of the Club World Cup. But as far as this year goes, I hope Auckland City FC scores a goal at some point. That's where I'm at this stage.
Yeah, I'm very much on that team as well, Joe. And I think, like, things can be two things. It is cool that they are here. Like, what an experience for them. I'm trying not to be patronising, but we are talking about a team of, as we've outlined, like part-time players. They're having to take time off their work. A couple of players, and perhaps including the manager, who, by the way, the manager's not at this tournament. They've not really said why he's not at this tournament, so it could be a don't know, like a personal issue, but I kind of suspect.
Well, who's going to shear the sheep if he's not there, Graham?
Yeah, well, I kind of suspect to that point. I kind of suspect a lot of these players have had trouble getting time off work. I kind of suspect that he's having to work, and they're kind of covering for him in that sense. So, yeah, I've heard a lot of people saying like, "Oh, you've got to feel sorry for Auckland City." I don't feel sorry for Auckland City. I would take that. Put me in a team. Bayern Munich can score 20 past me, and I'll play at the Club World Cup in America for a month. But it's for FIFA. It is not a great look for them as they're trying to brand this as the best against the best. But they are in a difficult spot with this because Oceania is such an outlier. We talk about Auckland City being an outlier as a team. Auckland City are utterly dominant in Oceania as a club. And so it's Oceania that's the outlier in terms of the other confederations. So from a competitive standpoint, then maybe they shouldn't be here. But how do you exile a confederation when everyone else is represented and FIFA, as the world governing body, has a duty to represent all its member confederations? So they're in a difficult spot, and ultimately I do think they'll probably end up doing what Joe has suggested there, which is a play-in game, because when you look at the actual World Cup, when it was 32 teams, Oceania didn't have an automatic place for that, and they had a play-in game for that. So there's kind of precedent for that to be the case.
Yeah, I think you're right, Graham, not to feel sorry for them, because you imagine like when they're back at the pub after this tournament. So what did you get up to in your summer vacation? Oh, not much. Just kept Harry Kane from scoring for an hour in our first game, and got $2.5 million for turning up for this tournament thing. It was not bad. How about you? Where did you go? Yeah. So.
Yeah, and the money is a pertinent point there, not just in terms of what these players are going to take home in their pocket, and they will get. There's still a bit of a dispute there, by the way, between New Zealand football and these players, but they will get some kind of nice payday from this. But people are also, I haven't seen much comment on the $250 million solidarity fund that FIFA is handing out to all of the confederations and national associations as well. So there is going to be drip down here where New Zealand football is going to end up in a better position from that money coming into their possession, and hopefully that's going to result in better facilities or more like youth players or whatever. So Auckland City are going to be in a better place after this tournament, regardless of how many hundreds of goals they concede in their next two games against Benfica and Boca. Doesn't get much easier for them. They've been drawn a tough hand there.
They have indeed, but hopefully they enjoy the experience. It's all about the journey, not the destination, as disproved by Joe Lowry on a previous episode. Joe, I think you discussed Major League Soccer teams at the Club World Cup on Tuesday's episode. Go check that out on the feed, listener, if you haven't already. No MLS wins yet in the tournament. And talking about a tough run-in, I mean, the Sounders, they've got PSG and Atleti coming up, for example. What do you think about the MLS teams and their performances thus far, generally speaking? And do you have any sort of an anticipation of what they'll achieve in the next few games?
Yeah, I think Miami are going to ship at least 3 goals in each of their next 2 games. They've got Porto and Palmeiras who drew. Miami also drawing with Al Ahly. Every team in that group is on 1 point so far. I think Miami looked incredibly frail, if I'm trying to summarize all these things. I think Seattle have a chance to at least put in a respectable performance against Atletico Madrid, in part because Atletico Madrid was played off the field by PSG for long chunks of that game, although they did have a couple of chances on the break, Atleti. But also because of what we saw LAFC do with Chelsea, where LAFC were pretty defensively stout, and Seattle in their opener against Botafogo in that 2-1 loss did a lot of good stuff in that game. Like, you can make a pretty compelling argument that outside of the game-breaking moments, which ultimately define these games, Seattle were the better team against a very solid, if not spectacular, Botafogo side. So I think Seattle will probably get embarrassed by PSG, but maybe not by Atletico Madrid, and that's pretty much where their bar is set at this point. If you couldn't beat Botafogo, you had no chance of getting out of this group anyway. So competitively, Seattle's done in this competition. I still think if there's a team that has a chance to get out of the group, it probably is LAFC, even though they still have yet to go through Flamengo, who they're probably not going to get through. But they've got a winnable game against Esperance coming up next for them. And then at that point, you sort of hope that you get a result, and then you go and do something against Flamengo. But yes, Jeff and I went through and did a lot more detail on these games on Tuesday. The TLDR is, MLS teams are pretty much performing as we expected, which is to say they're not winning games.
Yeah, indeed. And I will say, Graham, I don't know if you listened, I had the radio on Tuesday, and like it was headline news about Chelsea winning that game over LAFC and the crowd there as well. And they even were playing on the radio, on BBC Radio, a Maresca quote about the crowd. And he was just basically saying, yeah, we just play in front of who we paid to play in front of, basically, was his gist of that one. But it was interesting that was the kind of storyline that was cutting through over here.
So you're talking about like British radio you were listening to. Yeah, there's a weird contradiction going on over here where it feels like everyone is talking about the Club World Cup, but the narrative is nobody cares about the Club World Cup. Meanwhile, it's on terrestrial TV over here in the UK, which will get in more viewers than Champions League games will be on a subscription channel like TNT. So that's another thing where I rally against this narrative that nobody's paying attention. Like, you go into the BBC site, top story every day is something to do with the Club World Cup. So yeah, I think people are paying attention, even if they liked it. I think the thing is, Ryan, people in the UK just like to moan and complain about particularly anything new, but just anything in general. And so this Club World Cup has given them some ammunition.
Is it ironic that you're moaning about that?
Possibly, yes. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Graham, Joe, any other games we want to touch on before we let dear listener head on with the rest of their day? I don't know if there's any...
Just, I would echo Joe's thoughts on PSG and the Atleti game that he kind of referenced earlier. I have a sense that they're just going to kind of stroll this whole thing when you consider that, like, the teams that would ordinarily be able to go toe-to-toe with them, Real Madrid are kind of in this weird transitional period under Xabi Alonso. Man City also in a weird transitional period under Pep Guardiola. I only caught the first half of their game against Vidal before I had to, before they took my phone off me before entering the Andy Murray torture chamber. But they look good in that first half. Their midfield with Ryan Cherky and particularly Tiani Reinders, who was in a much sort of deeper Rodri-esque role than I am familiar seeing him in, also with the number 4 jersey, which potentially suggests that's where Pep and Man City see his long-term future for that team. Alternatively, Jude Bellingham wears number 5 and is like a marauding number 9 hybrid number 10 player, so it could mean nothing at all. But they were interested in Man City, but again, I don't think they're the finished article. So when you see a PSG putting 4 goals past Atletico Madrid, who were made to look very old and very slow by this PSG team, probably didn't help that they were playing in like 1,000 degrees in the middle of the day in Pasadena, but nonetheless PSG have been by a million miles. As much as I've praised Flamengo, which I've now learned I've been stitched up by every single British pundit who has pronounced it flamenco for the last 10 years, along with Roberto Martinez. But as good as Flamengo have looked, as good as Chelsea looked for periods in their match, I just think PSG are on another level right now.
Yeah. Didn't want to dance around that flamenco pronunciation too much. Sorry, Graham. Go on, Joe.
Boo. Yeah, I totally agree on PSG. Wow, just still reeling from that. The only other Man City note, we talked about Reinders in his role, is Ryan Cherky playing as a false 9 effectively in this game for Man City. They're in more of a 2-3-5 in possession in this game that they had, that would have been yesterday. And Cherky started for Erling Haaland, who came off the bench for him in the 60th minute of this game. I don't think that is Cherky's best role, but you can already see Pep Guardiola trying to get his hands on Cherky and try to figure out exactly where he wants to fit him into this team. The thing I love so much about Ryan Cherky and the reason why you can play him pretty much anywhere across that front line or even a little deeper in midfield in a possession-dominant team is the dude is just never bothered. Like, he is never fazed by pressure. He is one of the most press-resistant attackers you will come across. So I do think there's a world in which he actually works quite well as a false 9 with someone like Marmoush next to him, and that's what we saw in this game where Marmoush had a lot of freedom on that left side of the attacking midfield group, and he could drop or he could push in beyond. You had some real runners in behind in this game with Doku and Savinho, Foden in this team as well. It was a really attack-heavy group from Pep, but seeing Cherky in this team for the first time in a game that had some sort of consequence, I thought was interesting, and it was fascinating to see Pep play him as a false 9, which is not a role he's played a lot of over the years. I am officially on Ryan Cherky watch because I love him very much.
Excellent stuff. On that note, let's wrap up this Club World Cup review. We will, of course, be checking in with the tournament next week on the feed as well. But for now, Joe Lowry, thank you very much indeed for your insights as always. Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Also, shout out Sergio Ramos scoring a corner kick goal against Inter. 1-1 draw, Monterrey. Well done, lads. Nice. Very good indeed. Graham Ruthven, pleasure as always, sir. Thank you, Ryan Bailey. He's now going to have to actually change the number on the back of his shirt to the number that he, what was it, like 36? So, yeah, that's his new shirt number. Yeah. There we go. Them's the rules. Listener, never been 92, though. We all know that. Never been 92. Yeah. Listener, thank you very much for joining us on this episode. We'll be back on the feed very shortly indeed. But for now, bye.